So on this garment project I've completed the shoulder joins, so I have the grafting video on that, and I'm now going to hang this for completing some short road sleeve caps. So on the edge from the shoulder seam I already have marked out where my underarm join is going to be on both sides. The first sample that I worked on, I only did a partial sleeve cap, so instead of picking up from the seam to the underarm, I just picked a number of stitches. This time I'm going to try it and see how it looks from the underarm, so that the sleeve cap would be a little bit deeper. So I'm just going to spend the time picking up. I'm going to take my 1 and 2 transfer tool, starting at the middle. We're going to be taking the left hand side of the seam, hanging on needle 1 left, the right hand side of the seam hanging on needle 1 right, making sure to come in as close to the seam as possible so that we don't end up with a hole. Then I'm going to go in with my 2 prong, and I'm going to pick up 2 edge stitches, having missed 1, and I'm going to pick up along this edge, missing 1, picking up 2. And you can change this if it doesn't quite work out. You can change this to picking up 3 and missing 1, which might give a more smooth look, but you can just try it depending on what tension you're using and what effect that you're going for. Each time I'm making sure that I'm picking up both legs of the V, and I can see there as I've picked up, that's going to leave quite an obvious bump or hole, so I'm going to drop that 3 that I selected and come back and rehang it. And I'm just pushing the needle butts back into B position just to see how that join is going to look. And I'm going to do that all the way down to the yarn marker. And once you're down at the yarn marker end, you're going to take a note of what needle you have hung. So in my case, if I take this marker out, I'm just unlooping it. I'm going to leave it in there just to make sure that I don't end up with an obvious loop. And what I want to do is try and match up the same needle. So here I'm on 50. When I hang the other side, I'm going to try and hang to the same amount of needles so that the sleeve is even and it won't be unbalanced. A few different ways you can do that. You can either just start hanging in the same way that you did here, or you can take that end marker and you can hang that on the same needle, and then just gradually work your way across, either picking up the halfway point and gradually splitting those in half, or just continue on with your method working from the centre. So now that we're completely done with hanging these stitches, what I want to do is bring out the centre needles, and I'm just going to weave in these tails just to secure them, and try and take them in the opposite directions so that it will help close up that hole. So now I can come in with my main carriage, and I know the tension that was being worked for the lace carriage, but what I want to do is make this first row a little bit looser. So I'm going to go up by one number and join this, and then I'm going to come in at this end, weave in that tail. This just helps to cut down on the time at the end to finish the garment, and you can decide whether you want to weave these tails back or not. So now I'm ready to start some short rowing. I'm just going to remove these markers so that they don't get caught up in the sinker plate. So I'm going to do automatic wrap, and I'm probably going to do 3 needles to hold every time. So for an automatic wrap, I'll want 2 opposite the carriage. I want to knit across, but obviously I want to set that to hold, so I'm just going to undo those 2, changing the carriage setting to hold, pull out that 3rd needle, pull out 2 opposite the carriage. That 3rd needle is going to automatically wrap. 1 on the carriage, 2 on the opposite. 1 on the carriage, 2 on the opposite. And you can decide if you want to start hanging weights at this point. I might just put 1 in the centre and gradually move 1 on either edge. So the yarn's going underneath that needle. Just remember to keep moving the weights in. So what if you lose track of where you are and you think, oh, well, if I pulled 1 out on that side, then the yarn should be laying over all of the rest of the needles bar that first one. So I know I've done the right setup for that side, but what about this side? How do I know whether or not I've pulled out the right needles if my concentration's been broken? Well, I can see where the wrap is, and it's on this first needle, so I know I need to pull these 2 out to work. If the wrap is back from the edge, depending on the number of needles that you're pulling out to work, so whether you're working 3 needles for short rowing or 4 or 1, it's entirely up to you, but just keep in mind that you should have the same number of needles out to hold past that wrap needle, and then I know needles correct on that side, the yarn layout is correct, and the needles correct on this side with the wrap in the right position. So I can continue on all the way down to however deep I want the sleeve cap to be. So I might leave it at that point to not pull any more out, because we're now evenly spaced here. I'm going to start working back up the way, so you can decide if you're happy with the depth of that cap right now from your shoulder seam. If you want it to be deeper, then you reverse the short rows to start adding more fabric at the centre. So reversing the short rows, I have done the automatic wrap here. I'm pushing 2 back on that end, so it will wrap on this needle and it will knit these 2. And then ideally you'd want that to be 3 actually, because what you're going to do the automatic wrap in reverse is you pull that needle back out and then push 3 opposite the carriage. Pull that needle by the carriage out to hold, push 3 back. One to hold by the carriage, 3 back, opposite. One to hold, 3 back. And you can see us starting to add more fabric on here now. So this is me doing automatic wrapping. You can do manual wrapping, which means that every time you have to relay the yarn to wrap the correct needle. Every time we're just moving our weights out. And you can see here that weight isn't becoming that effective. So what I might do is take that off, and this is the piece of fabric back here. So I'm going to grab here, take the weight, go up through the back of the work and hang it from the back. And you can see that adds better tension than here, because we have this fabric that we've created in the centre. So I'm ready to wrap. The 3 needles are back. Wrap, return, wrap, return. Now just be careful that you don't push the needles that you're returning to work too far back, because you don't want to lose the wrap. Otherwise, you can see here I've done it purposefully. The wrap here has been split, so only half of that stitch. So I'll have to come back at some point and catch that in. So what I'm going to do is mark it now so that I don't forget. And I'm just going to gather that entire area with a light bulb pin. Make sure to close the pin off, and then I can go back working through the rest of the sleeve. And now I'm finished. I'm going to cancel so that these end needles will knit off. And there is the sleeve cap. So this will be interesting to see what sort of shape this is created now. I think it might be a little bit too deep here. So next time I would probably only go so far down the needles and then work back. Depends on the shape of your upper arm. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this off on waste yarn and see how it looks. Because I don't want to spend the time finishing binding off if it's not going to be the look that I want. So you can decide whether you want to go straight in with waste yarn or whether you want to do a ravel cord. I think I'll probably do ravel cord first, just to make it easier to remove the yarn, the waste yarn. So ravel cord is always done at tension 10. I'm just hand tensioning this in. Now you probably want some more rows of waste yarn than this, but we'll see how this goes. So my carriage is empty, I'm putting tension on the work, and I'm just going to release it from the machine. There we go. So now I'm going to put it over on my mannequin and see how this looks. Okay, so we can see it's achieved the desired effect to cap the sleeve. However, on my body that is coming out too far, so I would probably stop short rowing maybe a third less than what we've done here, and then start to reverse it out so that the cap would actually stop further in the turning point. It would stop further in before it bent, and that would create a much better look, I think. Although it's quite an interesting concept to think that you could add shoulder width if you had a shaped garment. So here we can see how it fits. I want to come in here and finish this with some crochet, or if you like the curl, you can always leave that as a design feature, just the raw curl of the fabric. But this is where my shoulder is, and this is where the short rowing wants the shoulder to be. So ideally, if you had shaped this to make this area narrower, that could have made quite a nice sleeve cap. So probably this would be more for along the lines of like a set-in sleeve, rather than this style, which is a more of a drop shoulder style. So I'm going to have a go at redoing this. So I'm coming back in now, and what I'm doing is I'm hanging 2 in 1 just to see if it makes any difference to the size of the sleeve area, and I'm also going to experiment to have a look and see how we can do the short rowing but just start the short rowing further in. So I'm still going to hang the full width of the sleeve hole and then have a little play around. This isn't going to be the neatest pickup because I just want to get it hung on and see how it looks. Okay, so in order to work less of the sleeve area, I'm going to bring opposite the carriage to hold 20 of the needles. I'm going to set my carriage to hold. I've weaved in the tail at the start. I'm going to knit across, and then I'm going to pull out 20 on that side, and then just work some short rowing here for a shallower turn. Okay. So I'm going to do an automatic wrap there. 20 out to hold here, automatic wrap with that one, and then decide what do I want to do. So I'm going to try doing 4 maybe, 4 out to hold each time, and then pull the 5th one forward to do the automatic wrap. So wrap 4, and I think I'll now work back the way, because we don't want this to come too far away from the shoulder area. What I might actually try and do is see how it looks changing the short rowing going in reverse, because this effectively is a turning point, but if I kept using the same amount of needles that I've been doing to create the first short rowing section, then I'm only going to be creating another depth like that, and I want it to kind of start coming down the arm. So instead of returning 5 to work, I'm going to return 3. So we're going to start adding more fabric on here, the second section, to try and have the edge of the sleeve cap come further down the arm. I don't know, it's going to be an experiment. So 3 back to work. This is already automatically wrapped. I'm going to do an auto wrap, so pull that 1 back out, return 3. So I'm at the point now where I'm back to where we first started to do the short rows. And if I knit straight now, then I think the fabric, the sleeve opening would be flared. So I'm trying to fill out, instead of having that at the finish line, I want to try and fill out the rest of these needles to bring down the finished edge. Okay, so wrap back 3. Yeah, we can see the shape in here, it's not making as much of a pocket. So that's definitely looking a lot better. So wrap, return. So now I'm left with the 3 and holding that end, but it's all knitted off on the other end. I'm just going to reset the hold off, knit across. That looks much better. Okay, so what I want to do now is decide whether or not to finish it, take the time to finish it, or just take it off and waste yarn. I think we'll take it off and waste yarn and we'll have a look. So the usual thing, before I put the waste yarn in, I'm going to do some ravel cord and then come in with the waste yarn. So we can see this one looks a lot better in terms of a sleeve cap in comparison to the first one that we tried to do. It's too much shaping at the top here. So I think once, let's get the peg off of here and put it at the shoulder join. I think what I would probably do at that point would be to do some decreases across this row before I would do a hem, just to encourage it to lay flat, otherwise it's going to want to flare out. So I'd probably add some decreases in the bottom area just to encourage it to lay like that. It really is just a trial and error to see what the tension and the yarn like to do on short rowing. I definitely think less short rowing in the beginning, so starting further up the arm and then doing the short rowing just to create that turn area, and then changing the ratio to return it back to work gives a much better shape to the sleeve cap. But if I was finishing this off for a short sleeved t-shirt, I would do some more experimenting with adding in decreases here before finishing with the hem. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the thumbs up button if you enjoyed this video. Feel free to leave a comment, and until the next time, you've been watching Button Mouse the Wee Machine Knitter.